Okay, could the bicycle know information or sense directly the road? There's actually a company you may have heard of, it's called Waze. Has anyone heard of Waze? For driving, is collecting information about where they are and how fast are they moving in traffic. And so with Waze, you agree to upload your information, where are you, how fast are you moving, and in return, you get that information from everyone else. So it's a crowdsourced traffic information. It's not coming from a satellite or a helicopter, it's coming from everyone else that's in the same position, and the aggregate of that information tells you things you want to know. So an idea that we're considering is, could we build Waze for bicycles, where people from bicycles are going to upload their data? I think also contained in that, there's a very interesting question which we're going to explore. I wanted to raise it and explore it throughout this talk, which is, what is private information and what is public information? So we were hearing, Teppo was asking about, there was a number of ideas coming back and forth about what information that the government has, how can the government provide? And in fact, governments do provide this information. They provide weather information, they provide through GPS, positioning data that comes from satellites. So as individuals, we don't have the resources to go and create a satellite network. But collectively, we have those resources, and we have done those things. Together in the world, we have put satellites in orbit that now give us that information. And so that kind of information that has been put into the public domain, we can then access it and use it. But now we're also taking what used to be private information. Sometimes we share the information only one-on-one with people. But we're now also building a middle ground, a public and a private space, like a library, or like a city square, or like a university, for example. So this is not completely a public space. It's not open for anyone to come in at any time. It's not completely a private space. It's not like your home. So there's some dynamic that defines how can the space be used that's somewhere between public and private, and we negotiate that depending on the situation. And so one of the questions that we may want to ask here together is for data. How are we going to be able to control data where it's not completely public and it's not completely private? And I think the example that we were just hearing Teppo was asking about, the one idea that we identified as in the collection for KUM has to do with this idea of personal information that relates to barcodes. So that's something that is private. It's about you, where is your location, but you may be choosing to share it. And who are you choosing to share it with? That'd be one of the questions, I think, that's continuing. So I wanted to give now an example from a workplace that has to do with the measuring of the body. So we were talking before about sensors and how our body has senses, 5, 6, maybe more if we include common sense, which is good to have. And with electronics, again, as engineering, we've got this benefit that we can extend what the capability of the body is. So we can measure things in the electrical domain. For example, that I'll show here has to do with measuring heart and respiration. So that's something we can find heart rate. If we go to the doctor ourselves, we can monitor the heart rate just with our own senses. But if we want to get the diagnostic quality of what's happening inside the heart, we need more precise measurement. And so measurement sensors gives us ability to get more precise data. In addition to this, another thing that we can do with sensors, we can change time. I want to know, does anyone have any examples? If we use sensor data, how can we either get access to things that we're measuring that are faster than our normal senses or slower than our normal senses? Fast or slow? Any examples? How can we use sensors to extend our capability? I can give you one, maybe then we'll go on. So one example is if we're trying to understand what's happened over time. So we can look in archaeology, we can measure in the ground and see evidence. We take a tree. What happens if you take a tree and you look at the cross-section of the tree? What would you see? Age. And that's something that we don't know. The trees have lived longer than we have, but if we observe that information in the tree, we get information about longer sense of time. So actually some sensors now are being put down into the core of ice and measuring information about the environment to tell us what's happened over time. So with sensors, we get access to extend our knowledge of the world. This is some details. I won't go into a lot of it here. I just wanted to illustrate that in the case of the body, we've got this situation where we want to get information about the heart. So if we use electrodes, this is something that's been known for 100 years, we can then find out diagnostics in the ECG waveform of the heart. Now in the past, you would need an entire board roughly of this size with many different devices in it. You have to build an amplifier, you have to build a data converter, you have to do signal processing. But as we work in the age of silicon, of semiconductor engineering, our job in this world as electrical engineers is to miniaturize those parts. And if we do that, we get some distinct advantages. Not only do we get a device that's better than the last generation. As we heard, we're always creating new things, and some of the new things are coming on top of the old things. But it's also transformational. If we make it small, it now becomes portable. We don't have to stay in the hospital. We can go out of that hospital back into our normal life, and we can still be collecting information about the heart. So that was the object in this particular exercise. And with this, again, we get access to making a change. So this is the current state. So again, as engineers, what we want to think about is what is the current state of reality as it is today, but how might it be different? We have to imagine how it would be different in the future. So the way that things are today, if we don't feel well, we visit the doctor, or in our own house, we can measure things. What's something that you might measure if you're not feeling well? What kind of measurements might you make? Temperature? Sugar? Your blood pressure? Yes? So these are all good things to know, but the current model is we wait until we have a problem, and then we take the measurement. And we're missing something. We don't know what it was before. We know what the average is. We know what a normal range of temperature is for people. With temperature, it's fairly small range. We all need to be kept comfortable in a very tight range of temperature. But other parameters about the body, like sugar, or like blood pressure, or information about the brain, those things are going to vary from each person to another. So what we're imagining in the future that we could do is we could have data that we're collecting on a continuous basis. So we then have the baseline. We know for our own self we've been calibrated what is the current reality. And we can then measure when things change. And we can even become aware. One group was asking me yesterday, can we measure the body and get information that we don't ourselves know about how our own body is changing? So I think that's a very exciting area, both for sensors in general, and maybe there's a way to apply that when we're going to have a large group of people here for the upcoming event. So I wanted to know, has anyone encountered this phrase from Thomas Friedman, where he said the world is flat? Raise your hand if you've heard this phrase before. Okay, and could somebody tell us, when they hear this phrase, what does it make them, what do they think it means? What's the meaning?
So Thomas Friedman written that everywhere you are going, no more there are biases of gender or finance. All the facilities with the communication channels are available everywhere. Go remote part, go to Africa, or go to Bangalore or Silicon. It's safe.
Oh, this is great. Thank you. So let me just repeat back for those what I heard, make sure if I get it right. And I think the last part you said also I want to highlight. So the first part was Thomas Friedman wrote a famous article in a book, The World is Flat, and his idea was things that have been differentiated in the past in some ways they're getting flat. There's less barriers between people, which is a good thing. Convergence is happening. And also, I think in the last part that you said, things that, because of communication technologies that we're building together, places that were far apart in the past really can be in close communication today. We can call people all over the world, no delay even, and we can have conversation. Then I wanted to lead, though, with also the last part you said. Silicon Valley, Bangalore, and Africa. Where in Africa?
Yeah.
Where? Pick a...
Nigeria,
Lagos. Okay, so these are not just the entire world. So the world is flat says we're taking what used to be a barrier of space, and that barrier is no longer a barrier because we've changed with communication. But in addition, this was the next part I wanted to bring. The contrast to Thomas Friedman, sort of building on his idea, is Richard Florida. And Richard Florida is a sociologist. He's based in Toronto, Canada. He was in the United States and works for the Atlantic Cities project. And he said, actually, let me build on that idea of the world is flat. It's true that flat is happening in the sense of communication. But that doesn't mean that everywhere in the world, everything is happening. Instead, he says the world is spiky. So has anyone heard this, or what does this mean? If you're seeing it for the first time, what do you think it could mean? Yes, please.
Full of hardships.
Full of hardships. So spiky is that sense that it's not smooth. Yep, I think that's a part of it.
Yeah, actually, there are centers emerging where most of the resources are coming together.
Yes.
So instead of it is flat, but then there are certain areas where lot of resources are available and they are sporadically distributed.
Thank you. That's exactly well said. So I think it's got both of the choice of word spiky is that this is not completely a comfortable situation. And then I think the practical side, and he illustrates this in maps. So this is just one of the maps that he has. The idea, again, just to repeat, and then I'll add to it, is that there's concentrations. And that there's ways that things are happening that's not happening everywhere in the world, but there are places where it's coming together, it's crystallizing. And so this map actually is a population. So of course you can see, here in India is a very large concentration of the world's population. Where we live in North America, actually, different graphs that he has. He also looks at things like for Silicon Valley. So where in the world are these kinds of engineering happening? It's true they're happening in many places, but it's not happening in every place. So we are here. This is one of the places that's really unique in the world where there's a crystallization coming together of people who have a shared interest, of problems that need to be solved, and radical. So we're really living at a great time. It's a great opportunity. So again, it sort of echoes why is this exciting here today. I just want to build now on this idea of maps, because maps and sensors, I think, and some of these came out in the proposals that we heard yesterday in the pitching session. So this is an example from an event that happened in Boston 2 weeks ago. The city convened Innovation Cities, and they brought people in from several cities, mostly from the East Coast of the United States, to ask what is happening to encourage innovation in cities. And this was one example. They did a map. You can't quite see it here, but I'll sketch out for you. This is the Boston Harbor, so the map kind of ends here. There's not too much happening. But these were all colored with different kinds of innovation. So there were hospitals, there was academic universities, there was industrial research centers, there were places, coffee shops. It was mapped in all different ways. It was distributed throughout the city, but concentrated for several different areas. So the question then is, how can we take information that we know and put it into a place where we can get new insights about our situation? Here's another model of a map. This one you can find at the Morgan Museum in New York City. And what it is, it's an artifact that shows when the Europeans first came to the New World, to North America. Well, I think in the interest of time we'll go on, but we'll come back. I wanted to give a couple more examples. Look about from industry, from several branches of the government, from academic research. There were students there. This was one example of a company that presented something that they're doing currently with maps. It's called Geophedia. It's available. It's an open source platform. And what they do is they take map information, such as you might find in Google Maps or Earth Maps, but they add onto it current information that's coming out of social networks. So they look into things like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Foursquare, other types of social mapping. And they pull in if a person has chosen to say, where am I, by putting in the GPS code, or they look at the text. So if a person puts in Twitter and they say, here's where I'm at, I'm in such and such a place, they pull that information together. And in real time, they can then put that information on top of a map. And they're imagining this, I guess, what might be some reasons why you'd want to put the social network data onto the physical map? Anyone have a thought why someone else might want to do it, or what might we want to do with it? What could you do if you had social network data put into a map form?
So there are many people who don't know the places, or if for any chance I have to come and meet you, I don't know where you stay, but from this map I can trace you down and I can come and meet you.
Yes, this is great. So there might be people that are new to an area. How do they locate themselves? Also, people may already be putting out the public information. If you want to meet somebody, for example, through Twitter, that's public information. If you want to search for it, you can. But today you have to search on a text basis. So if it was put into the map format, you could search on a map basis. Go on.
So, and with this, we can help people much more. For example, like you're a father. If you have to trace down your children, where they are, you can do that also. You're a friend on the social network, just click on where they are.
I'm a father, I'm a dad, I'd like to know. It's a question I think every parent, where are my kids? Sometimes the kids are thinking, gee, I want my friends to know where I am. I don't know about my dad, but so you want to moderate your information. It's really good. Thank you. So here was a way, I wanted to share this for two reasons. One, an outcome of this was called the Data Palooza. So Hackathon, Palooza, everyone's trying to think of ways that when you get a group of people together, how do you get them engaged? How do we generate information? And we see that with smaller groups, with large groups. This is a lecture format, but it's a chance for me to share with you some of the things I'm thinking of, and then to get back in return. This model is talking about graphic information. So they had a person who's very skilled in graphic information, but everybody knows how to do at least some kind of sketching. And what's wonderful about this is, in the time that I have available, I can't tell you all the stories from the 2 days of this event that I attended in Washington. But with this visual information, you get at least a snapshot. And then immediately generate some ideas in your mind. Or a chance I could tell you, if I had more time, I would tell you about the bus, which is a way to get on-demand buses to come and bring your tour group where you need to go. So I could share with you those stories, or you may see something in here. You can find me at the break and say, Bruce, I saw something in that slide. I just wanted to know, what was that about? So with visual information, you can communicate a lot. I would encourage that throughout this event, we've got whiteboards. We have those large white engineering drafting sheets. And I would say as you're going through the work that you're going to do after this session, try to make as much of it as you can in a graphical format. It doesn't have to be polished and fancy. It just has to be thinking, in addition to thinking in words, thinking in sketches. Okay, so on the topic of hackathon, I wanted to echo, for those of you who are new to the hackathon world, some experiences I've had. This actually is probably my third hackathon. I did one that was a business startup, worked through Startup Weekend. I did this one last week in the Boston area, and here I am today participating in this hackathon. This one I wanted to share with you from Boston was convened by PCMA. This is a group of professional convention and conference managers. These people run events such as this one, small events, 100 to 200 people, large events up to 20,000 people, such as you might find at the Boston Convention Center. And there was 3,000 people that came to this event, so if you imagine 3,000 times, who knows, how large an event. That's really reaching a lot of people throughout the world. At the same time, as they are in that, or busy organizing those things every day, they hold these meetings every day. There are meetings being held. This is an annual meeting that's held every meeting. They decided what they really need is a hackathon. Why did they need a hackathon? Because every time you go at it directly and you talk to the same group of people that you've talked to before, you can have a lot of success. But you don't have all the success that you're capable of. And that's because you need new ideas to come in, and you want to think about things. And you don't just want to think, but you want to take action. As we heard from Chappell earlier today, you want to begin to do some of the testing, begin to act it out. You want to take that action right away while you're here. And so the idea of that hackathon, which they ran and which we're experiencing today, is we get people together from a number of different areas, and we say, let's work on it right now. Let's see what ideas we could have. And this one took place over 48 hours, just like we're doing over 72 hours. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of late nights. It's a lot of time, to spend together, both in working and also having some fun. And this also, you may see is familiar. So after building the first prototype, the people who did it stand up and describe what they did and see what their reaction is. But I wanted to share this also. So part of it is hackathon, which we're doing. It's really exciting. But part of it also is what this one is, I think, was kind of interesting. I was sharing this with one or two of the teams yesterday, but I wanted to get it while we have this opportunity in the lecture format to get one to many, which is this was Eric that had developed this. Took a map again of the building. And the question he was trying to solve is how can people find each other? How can they self-organize to meet in a place where they haven't been before? So if you could take the map data and load that up into the system, if then you could have something, in his case he chose web apps because that was the purpose of that hackathon. Don't be constrained by it, web apps, but that was his particular application. And he wanted to know, could we build it in such a way that people could self-organize a meeting, and they would then, across different platforms, whether it was a phone or a tablet or a computer, be able to see in real time who's joining up to that meeting. So he built this system. He got some open source software called Meteor that already existed. He built his own piece of it, and you could then click somewhere on the map and say, I want to organize this meeting. You could make it an open meeting if you want, or a private meeting where you invite the people. So again, there's this idea of public space, private space. What's the in-between? This is only one bit, right? Public or private. But maybe it could be a group. There could be several small groups of people that already know each other that want to meet. So there's a lot of options as to how to do it. But once you do that, all these things happen in real time. Again, with our communications technologies that we're creating, we're giving the ability to have things be much more rapid than they were before. Okay, so you met my son Elijah, and you've met my oldest daughter Miriam. So this is my youngest daughter Leah, and you can see she's also a fan of the famous cat tool. Of course, maybe it does relate to me giving them constantly sticky notes. They asked for them, and this was us at the Museum of Fine Arts. I was happy to see that later that week they actually had an installation that had to do with sticky notes. So I figured we were there at the right place at the right time. But she's putting up some ideas on the wall, so she's asking you also, what are your ideas? Okay, and I just wanted to share one more example before we conclude. And I was wondering, has anyone seen, some of you may have seen these, has anyone seen these before? So I think there's something interesting here between the public and the private, and it also relates to our QR code. But, so this is what you're looking at. Let me give you the close-up. On the left, it's like a metal cylinder, and on the right is a clay tablet. Does anyone know what this is, or when you look at it, what comes to mind? What is it? What ideas are in your head? And this is an artifact, so it's a real thing from several thousand years ago, but what is it?
The data is wrapped around that cylinder.
The data is wrapped around the cylinder, yes. Yeah, so if you were to look at it here, there's a pattern that's carved in, all around this part. And so what do you see? So you've got the cylinder here, and what about the clay?
So the design shows that even an illiterate can see the visuals and
Yes.
can recognize that what the event was and what were the people doing in it.
Yes, so that's very important. So it's not a language-based system. You don't need to have prior knowledge, to be able to read. Which, of course, 3,000 years ago, reading was an elite capability. Yes.
It shows some event like measure.
Yes. Yeah. So I think this one is from Hittites. They're from the Middle East. These ones I think are Sumerians. So around that time, and it shows a story. So there's a story encoded in it. And why would you want to have one of these? What would you do with it that would be worth creating this out of precious materials?
I think it is a universal language to show. People
Yes.
who have any dialect or any religion can understand it very well.
Yes. Correct. Yes.
It's a visual language which people earlier used in ancient times.
Yes.
Use pictures to communicate
Yes.
or record.
It's exactly it. Now, I think sometimes you might see these types of things on a building, right? Or there are many places you could find them. But why would this one come from this device and then be put into this tablet? So where else might you see something like that, where you make an impression from a metal thing into a soft thing? What else would you make that kind of an impression? In wax, maybe.
Clay.
I'm sorry.
Clay
Yes.
toys.
Stand up, maybe.
Clay toys.
Clay toys. Clay. Sending a letter, and what would you do with that letter if you wanted to let someone know who you were?
Authentication.
Authentication. Yeah. Could you stand up and tell us more?
Authentication.
Yeah. So what's the authentication? What's the problem that needs to be solved with
It is
authentication?
me who has sent you the letter, not someone else.
That's right. So you want to know that if you want to send me the letter, it's coming from you and not someone else. And why would you use a device like this? What's the advantage?
Dates back to 3,000 years, so it could be something. Nowadays we are having signs and all.
Yeah. So today you wouldn't use this, right? And why would you not use it today?
It's quite big.
It's big. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
And the making,
It's not convenient. Yeah, that's right.
It's open, so there is no secrecy.
There's no secrecy. Yeah, so I think this is the important point, and I think it's related, we'll come to the awesome box in a moment. I think it's related to some of our question, because we're creating information that's going to relate between large groups of people and small groups of people, between public data and private data. And so I just saw this recently when I was at the museum, but it really struck me that this is an example, just like, and does anyone want to tell us what it is? What is public key, private key?
Key which is used before sending to me, my key is public.
Yeah.
Anyone want to send data to me, they will encrypt with my phone.
That's right.
But if I want to decrypt it, I have a private key, so only I can open.
That's right. So a public key and a private key differs, and there's been a long history, right, of secret keys. But if we want to exchange a secret message, I have to get you the secret key. That's a very dangerous proposition because we could be intercepted. and we might not even know it. But if you have a public key and a private key, it's a mathematical property that has it's recently discovered, right, by our community, electrical engineers and computer scientists, mathematicians, that found out that you can have an asymmetric generation. So you can generate the key, you keep the private key for yourself, and you never disclose it to anybody. So there's no interception. You send me the public key. That's something that could be intercepted. Anybody could then send you a message. But that message is something that only you can read. And if you reverse the operation, you can actually know that only the person that you think is sending the message. So you can use it for both authentication and you can use it for encryption. And the key of it is, just like we were describing, you can easily go from this, by rolling this into the clay, you can easily generate the clay tablet if you have the master. With the technology at the time, you could not go from the clay back to the cylinder. Of course, today it's not so useful. It's not convenient. It's not very limiting. But the significant reason why this doesn't last forever, obviously we wouldn't use it today, but even hundreds of years after it was invented, it stopped being of value. Because at the point where you could duplicate this, when a new technology becomes available that breaks this asymmetry, then you need to invent something new. So all engineering technology also has this property. It's good for a certain amount of time, and then time will move on. We're going to look for a new thing. So I think there's a part of this that relates. I think the QR code, if we think about that, it has that same property, right? It's public. You could easily copy it if you had a photocopier, but if you're wearing it on your wrist, it's not something that a person can easily get another one. So your identity is maintained when you check in with a QR code, because it's not easy in the environment that you're in to get a copy of that. It's too complex to read. It's not like a number that could be easily copied down. So we may think about, what if you did want to share it, right? With a QR code, what if you did want to give a version of it to someone else? How would you do it? So we might come up with some ideas in this room. So I wanted to leave with this last piece of technology. This was developed recently in the public library in my town, which is in Brookline. It's right next to Boston. And it's just called the Awesome Box. So first of all, there's a whole idea now, again, in the startup world, an awesome foundation, or talking about awesome in the sense of, wow, this is really fun. It's sort of the geek version of awesome. And in the library, typically, when you bring at that point, information is destroyed. What information is lost when I take the book that I've just read and I put it into a bin with all the other books that have come back? In fact, I go to the library, I take my kids, we typically take out a large number of books. We have big bags. We bring all the books back. What information is lost when all those books are put back in the bin?
All the books may be of different type. Some
Yes.
may be fictions,
Yes.
some may be story books, or some may be science books.
That's right.
So all the books are of different kinds, and if we are putting it in one single bin, the person has to first segregate them again.
That's right.
That information is
So the books could be of different type. They could be of different genre, like fiction, science fiction. Once they go back in the bin, they're going back to be categorized. Now, some of that information the librarians will take care of, right? They put information on it. There's a Dewey Decimal System, Library of Congress system. There's categories. There's ways, of course, to search it. So a lot of information is there in the library. But the one thing that the library doesn't know, that now that I've read the book has changed. It's changed because the information has come into myself, and I've changed because of that book. And that's the information that's not coming with the book. Now this device, it's only 1 bit, by the way, because the bit is either you put the book in the slot, in which case you're saying this book is awesome, or you put the book back in the standard book bin, in which case you're saying I have no comment. I'm not saying it's awesome or not awesome, right? But I'm not highlighting it. So 1 bit, I put it in here. The 1 bit is, what is it? Awesome. Okay. Doesn't go in here. So goes in here. What is it? Awesome. Okay. So with that information now, it's a social network, right? I'm not really saying a lot about what did I think about this book. All I'm saying is one thing about it is this book is awesome. I'm recommending that if you're looking for an awesome book, this is the one you get. And the librarian, they check it in. So it goes back to the library just like the regular books, but it comes like with a star. It's like a social network, just like you might do on Twitter or Facebook. It's like the like button, but it's physical. And so this is a piece here, where information that could be destroyed, it's lost, is being changed. And the fact that, and it's at the place where you're going to take action. You're about to give the book back, and this box says, hey, you've been changed by this book. Maybe. Of all the books that you took out, which book is the one that's changed? And so if you put the book now in the slot, it's not a large action you have to take, it's a small action, but that small action could lead to someone else reading that book. That could lead to big change. So small change can lead to big change. 1 bit is the smallest unit of information. When can that be applied? And how can you take information and make it physical? when you're interacting with the word physical. So these are a number of thoughts that I'd like to put before you as you think about today. You're going to go out, you're going to imagine those white sheets of paper, right? And Robert Fritz, who's a famous person that studied music composition, and he says when an artist looks at a blank sheet of paper, they don't say, I have a problem here. I've got a blank canvas. That's a problem. I have to change it into a filled canvas. They don't approach it that way. They say, I want to create something, and I'm imagining something in my mind. Once I've imagined it, then I set myself to create in the physical world the painting that I've already imagined in my mind. So as we create new engineering topics, as we create new engineering businesses, we are going to go through the same process. We're first going to start with a blank sheet of paper, and we're not going to be motivated that we just have to fill that paper. We'll be motivated because this is our opportunity to create the things that we care about for the people that we care about. And so I encourage you to take that, to go forward and to do awesome. Thank you. Oh yes, and bikes. If you have ideas, again, about how this could apply, I'm looking for a two-way street. I'm a bicyclist. We'll be having bikes in cities. I think there'll still be use for multiple modes. And I think we start with bikes because it's a very human scale of transportation. And then from there, we can create many things going forward. I'd like to thank you very much for inviting me and for your time.
Any quick questions?
Yes. Oh, and if you haven't already got my contact information, I invite you to see me or to contact me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm easy to find, and I'm really excited to be here. So it's on. KUMBHTHON. Okay, wait. We need the musical version. KUMBHTHON.